Airport fire station, we have a full emergency. I repeat, a full emergency.
At 0712 hours on the 22nd of August 1985, an aircraft packed with holidaymakers began its takeoff from the north of England's International Airport, Manchester. Its destination was the Greek island of Corfu. Minutes later, 54 people were dead and 60 injured after flames had engulfed the fuselage. The news and scale of the disaster stunned Britain. Government ministers and officials visited the scene and heard the experiences of survivors.
It's just an explosion. It's a loud bang. Thought a tyre had gone, and the pilot, immediately put the brakes on straight away, really stamped the brakes on. Looked out the window, just sort of see how fast we were slowing down, that sort of thing, and see all flames coming out of the engine. So as soon as we pulled up to a halt, we thought it was going to blow up because it was full of fuel. The tanks must have burst over because there's a lot of fuel out onto the runway, and people were sort of like panicking, saying, people saying get back in your seat, so everybody sat back down. But we thought it'd go out, the extinguishers on the plane. And basically straight away the foam tenders come and started spraying it. That was basically probably within a minute and a half of it happening.
How long did you have to get off the plane?
Well, we were off fairly quickly, 2 or 3 minutes, I suppose. Before it started filling up with smoke too much, we were getting off then.
What was it like when you got out and you realised what was happening to the plane and that people were still trapped inside?
It was pretty frightening, really. I just kept running across the field, I suppose. I didn't really look back until I was quite away from it. I suppose I was frightened of the whole plane going up.
To assess the extent of the fire, the crew sought advice from air traffic control, and passenger evacuation was recommended on the starboard side of the aircraft. Takeoff was immediately abandoned. An announcement was made of the public address system to evacuate using the right side exits. As the aircraft stopped, the left engine fire drill was actioned and the right engine shut down.
The first indications of an engine malfunction are likely to have come on these instruments here, which the pilot would be monitoring along with all the other instruments during takeoff. The next possible step with a fire would show on a small light here of an engine overheat. He can then use the engine fire checklist, which shuts down the engine, fires off the extinguishers into that engine, once again known off by heart and rehearsed and practiced regularly. The next step is much more difficult, and that's the emergency evacuation, which requires assessment and is quite complicated.
The cause of the fire was an uncontained failure of the left engine, initiated by the explosive rupture of number 9 combustor can. A section of the can had struck an underwing fuel access panel, causing fuel leakage, which was ignited by hot gases from the engine. Fuel was forced into the strong, turbulent wake by the extended thrust reverser buckets and burned vigorously. As the aircraft slowed down on the runway, the fire was fully established, leaving a trail behind. The engine's fire extinguishing system had no significant effect, as in the main the fire was external to the engine. Within 20 seconds of the aircraft stopping, fire had spread via the cargo hold and through air conditioning grills located on each side of the fuselage. The main factor controlling the fire's behavior was the positioning of the aircraft in relation to the wind, even though the wind was light. The wind direction carried the external fire against and beneath the rear fuselage, creating rapid penetration of the cabin interior. By now there was panic within the rear cabin due to the intense heat and choking black smoke.
People were panicking straight away, but it wasn't so bad at the front. It was, well, I was in the middle because flames came into the cabin. The side of the cabin, I don't know whether it split or whatever, but this flame, you just look back and see flames coming into the cabin and smoke was coming right the way along.
So you were sitting at the front, so you got out quite easily?
Not quite easily, because we were in row 6, but it's 6 and there's 6 rows, there's 30 people in front of us, and everybody's trying to get into the aisle. And it's just people pushing and shoving.
Was it dark?
Oh, no, lights were still on everything. Don't know how long that lasted for, because we were one of the first ones off.
And there was thick smoke at the time?
Just as we were in the queue to go down the chutes, it just come straight over our heads, but it was red hot, burnt back of your throat, it was like acid.
The stewardesses at the rear of the plane were faced with an impossible situation in the rapidly deteriorating circumstances. Both stewardesses and many passengers lost their lives in this section of the aircraft. The fire spread from the aft section of the cabin forward as roof panels and overhead lockers ignited and collapsed onto seats. Several areas of intense damage were possibly caused by flammable materials, including alcohol and aerosol sprays stored within hand luggage. At the front, the purser attempted to open the right forward door, which he found to be partially jammed. He then went to open the left forward door to allow evacuation. This was opened 25 seconds after the aircraft had stopped. Another 20 seconds passed before the right overwing exit was opened by adjacent passengers, and a further 25 seconds later, the purser successfully managed to free the jammed right forward door. The forward stewardesses had to pull passengers free, who had surged forward, becoming wedged in the aisle adjacent to the galley. A number of survivors owed their lives to the direct actions of the cabin crew, who remained on board until they themselves were almost overcome by smoke.
And someone got the doors open, it was just a big rush to get out. But we looked back and we could see flames come into the cabin and smoke coming along the roof. As soon as the smoke hit you, it was like a brick wall.
The speed of response from the Manchester Airport Fire Service had been rapid, and firefighting commenced approximately 25 seconds after the aircraft had stopped. The external fire was quickly brought under control, but by now the internal fire was well established. Additional fire appliances from Greater Manchester Fire Service quickly arrived at the scene.
When your men actually got to the scene, what confronted them?
About 2/3 of the aircraft was well alight. That's it. The rear 2/3 of the aircraft were well alight. A lot of people had escaped from the aircraft and there were still people aboard.
How long did it take before the fire was contained?
Well, almost immediately. When the fire service from the airport responded, they have special equipment and very quickly brought the fire under control.
Was the fire being fanned by the fuel tanks at the back of that plane?
Well, it's difficult to tell at that stage of the fire. You don't try to examine the whys and wherefores. You get on with putting the fire out and getting the people out of the aircraft.
The police coordinated and ensured protection of the scene and controlled the rendezvous points for all other services. Police headquarters were responsible for many areas of activity, including establishing a casualty bureau, collating information, and liaising with the press, radio and TV. Ambulance services responded quickly and alerted the nearest casualty receiving hospitals. The injured and those overcome by shock and toxic fumes were immediately taken for treatment. Of the 131 passengers and 6 crew, 54 died on the aircraft. A further male passenger, who was found unconscious in the forward aisle some 33 minutes after the aircraft had stopped, died several days later. Of those who survived, 18 escaped from the front left exit. 27 used the right overwing exit. And 35 escaped from the forward right door, which had been freed by the purser. Only 40% of the passengers engulfed in the dense smoke survived. Of these, 8 collapsed during their evacuation due to toxic gas and smoke inhalation. 2 were dragged out of the front left exit by cabin crew, and a 14-year-old boy was pulled out of the right overwing exit by a fireman 5.5 minutes after the aircraft stopped. The commander and co-pilot had made their evacuation through the flight deck right sliding window. After investigation of the facts and circumstances surrounding the Manchester tragedy, Britain's Department of Transport's Air Investigations Branch made 31 safety recommendations. Since that time, safety actions taken by the CAA include the revision of inspection and repair procedures, the strengthening of fuel access panels, and on board, fire emergency equipment has been increased. Breathing apparatus for cabin crew is now required, and smoke detectors in toilets are fitted. The standards for cabin fire extinguishers have been improved, and floor-level escape lighting introduced. Flammability standards for seat cushions and wall and ceiling panels are now much higher. And in the cargo hold, there are now improved fire containment standards. Amongst ongoing research and development, the CAA have issued specifications for passenger smoke hoods and full-scale tests into cabin water spray systems. Research is being carried out into the use of closed-circuit TV to aid the crew's view of the aircraft exterior. And there are recommendations for improved evacuation procedures, an area highlighted by the Manchester disaster. Airlines have now been instructed not to allocate seats adjacent to exits to the elderly, the infirm, or children. Cabin public address systems have been improved, and new procedures brought in as to the positioning of aircraft on the ground in the event of fire. Methods have been revised for both cabin crew and fire brigades when fighting fires in cabins. Finally, the CAA have improved training techniques in all areas of fire safety for cabin crews. Research and tests are constantly carried out by leading aviation authorities throughout the world. Many lessons from the Manchester tragedy have been learnt, but the learning process must go on. And let us all hope that the standards of aviation fire safety will continue to improve because of it.